Hey there, welcome to Quiz Time. I'm your quiz master, Sean, and I've got 100 questions all about the American Revolution. So without further ado, let's get started with question number 1. Which founding mother was born the first day the American colonies changed over to the Gregorian calendar? Was it Abigail Adams? Was it Martha Washington? Or was it Betsy Ross? And it was Betsy Ross. What date did John Adams think would be considered the anniversary of the American independence? Was it July 4th, July 3rd, or July 2nd? And he thought we'd be celebrating July the 2nd. What two founding figures died on the same day, July 4th, 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence? George Washington and John Jay, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, or Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson? It was John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Which state did not attend the 1787 Constitutional Convention? Was it Rhode Island? Was it Vermont? Or was it South Carolina who skipped it? It was Rhode Island. Who were the delegates of the Continental Congress who refused to vote for independence? Oliver Ellsworth and Silas Deane, Robert Morris and John Dickinson, or Lyman Hall and Edward Longworthy? It was Robert Morris and John Dickinson. What was the full name of the document that established the functions of the national government before the U.S. Constitution? The Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, or the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union? It was the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. Who was the first president of the United States Congress formed after the Declaration of Independence? John Hanson, George Washington, or John Hancock? And that was John Hanson. Who gave Independence Hall its current name? The Marquis de Lafayette, Benjamin Franklin, or was it Baron von Steuben who gave Independence Hall its current name? That was the Marquis de Lafayette. Which European nation wrote the Army's first Blue Book? Was that the Marquis de Lafayette? Was it Tadeusz Kosciuszko? Or was it Baron von Steuben? And that was the Baron von Steuben. Which European nation and veteran of the American Revolutionary War left his U.S. assets to the education and freedom of the U.S. slaves? Was it the Marquis de Lafayette, Tadeusz Kosciuszko, or Baron von Steuben? And that was Tadeusz Kosciuszko. Who was the oldest member of the Continental Congress? Was that Benjamin Franklin? Was it John Jay? Or was it Stephen Hopkins? The oldest member was Benjamin Franklin. What city was the United States' first capital under the Constitution? Was it New York City? Was it Washington, D.C.? Or was it Philadelphia? The first capital was New York City. Which founding father donated his library to help form the Library of Congress? Was it Benjamin Franklin? Was it Thomas Jefferson? Or was it John Adams? And that founding father was Thomas Jefferson. Which member of the Constitutional Convention had a peg leg? Was it Gouverneur Morris? Was it William Patterson? Or was it James Wilson? And that was Gouverneur Morris. Which state first ratified the Constitution? Was it Pennsylvania? Was Delaware first? or was the first to ratify it South Carolina? The first state to ratify it was Delaware. What was the name of the group tasked with writing the Declaration of Independence? Was that the Jefferson Committee? Was it the Declaration Committee? Or was it the Committee of Five? The name of that group was the Committee of Five. What was the original name of Independence Hall? The King's Hall? The House of the Commonwealth? Or was it originally called the Pennsylvania State House? It was the Pennsylvania State House. In what city was Benjamin Franklin born? Was he born in Philadelphia? Was he born in New Haven? Or was he born in Boston? Benjamin Franklin was born in Boston. Where did the first battle of the American Revolution take place? Was it Lexington and Concord? Was it in Boston? Or was it in North Sudbury? The first battle of the American Revolution took place at Lexington and Concord. What did Paul Revere yell on his famous midnight ride? The regulars are coming out! The British are coming! The redcoats are coming out! He originally cried out, the regulars are coming out. Who admonished her husband to remember the ladies? Was that Deborah Franklin? Was that Martha Washington? Or was that Abigail Adams? Remember the ladies, said Abigail Adams. Who is considered the founder of the United States Navy? John Paul Jones and John Barry, John Paul Jones and Alexander Hamilton, or John Barry and the Marquis de Lafayette? The founder of the United States Navy, John Paul Jones and John Barry. Who was the financier of the American Revolution? Was that Philip Schuyler? Was it Robert Morris? Or was it John Adams? The financier of the American Revolution was Robert Morris. Who was the second president of the United States under the Constitution? Was it John Adams? Was it Thomas Jefferson? Or was it James Madison, who was the second president? The second president under the Constitution was John Adams. Which constitutional amendment decreed that the president and vice president be elected together? Was that the 13th Amendment, the 12th Amendment, or was that the 21st Amendment? That was the 12th Amendment. What battle convinced France to assist the United States in the war? Was it the Battle of Saratoga? Was it the Battle of Bunker Hill? Or was the Battle of Fort Ticonderoga? It was the Battle of Saratoga. On what day did George Washington famously cross the Delaware River, beginning the Battle of Trenton? Was it December 25th, 1776, December 24th, 1777, or January 1st, 1778? That was December 25th, 1776. Who was the first United States ambassador to the United Kingdom? Was that Benjamin Franklin? Was it John Adams? Or was it Thomas Jefferson? The first U.S. ambassador to the UK was John Adams. How many lanterns were placed in the Old North Church in Boston to warn Paul Revere that the British were attacking by sea? Was it 1 lantern or 2? It was 2, if by sea. What was the first state to be admitted to the United States after the first 13? Was it Maine? Was it Florida? Or was it Vermont? The first state after the original 13 was Vermont. What grammatical edit did John Adams make to the Declaration of Independence on its way to the printer? What grammatical edit did John Adams make? Changing inalienable to unalienable. Where did Alexander Hamilton die? Did he die in Weehawken, New Jersey? Did he die in Greenwich Village, New York City? Or was it in the Hudson River? Alexander Hamilton died in Greenwich Village, New York City. Who was the third Vice President of the United States? Was it John Quincy Adams? Was it James Madison? Or was it Aaron Burr, the third VP? That was Aaron Burr. With which country did John Adams arrange a critical line of credit for the United States? Was it with the Netherlands? Was it France? Or was it Spain? He arranged a line of credit with the Netherlands. Which founding father died in debtor's prison? Was it Robert Morris? Was it Philip Schuyler? Or was it Alexander Hamilton? Who died in debtor's prison? Robert Morris. True or false? The First Continental Congress met in the building now known as Independence Hall. Is it true or is it false? And that is false. The First Continental Congress met in Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia. Who is said to have added, "So help me God," to the end of the presidential oath of office? Was that John Adams? Was it George Washington? Or was it Thomas Jefferson? "So help me God," said George Washington. Who was the first Vice President of the United States? Was it Thomas Jefferson? Was it Alexander Hamilton? Or was it John Adams? The first Vice President of the United States was John Adams. Which founding father famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death"? Was that Patrick Henry? Was it John Jay? Or was it Alexander Hamilton? And that was Patrick Henry. Which founding father introduced the resolution that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states? Richard Henry Lee, John Adams, or Benjamin Franklin? And that was Richard Henry Lee. How long was a presidential term under the Articles of Confederation? 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years? Under the Articles of Confederation, the presidential term would last only 1 year. What was the largest city of the colonies at the time of the American Revolution? Was it Philadelphia? Was it New York City? Or was it Boston? At the time of the American Revolution, the largest city was Philadelphia. What were George Washington's teeth made of? Animal and human teeth set in lead, wood, or gold? George Washington's teeth were made of animal and human teeth set in lead. What was Paul Revere's trade? Was he a printer? Was he a silversmith? Or was he a cobbler? Paul Revere's trade. He was a silversmith. What were the first two political parties? The Whigs and Republicans, the Democratic Republicans and Free Soilers, and the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. The first two political parties were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Who wrote the first American dictionary? Noah Webster, Alexander Hamilton, or was that Benjamin Franklin, who wrote the first American dictionary? That would be Noah Webster. What laws passed by the British Parliament were the catalyst for the First Continental Congress? The Townshend Acts, the Coercive Acts, or the Stamp Act? And that was the Coercive Acts. What did some of the people participating in the Boston Tea Party dress up as? British regulars, members of the Mohawk Nation, or they really didn't dress up? Those participating in the Boston Tea Party dressed up as members of the Mohawk Nation. Who called the meeting that resulted in the Boston Tea Party? Was that called by Paul Revere, Patrick Henry, or Samuel Adams? And that meeting was called by Samuel Adams. What colony did not attend the First Continental Congress? Was it Rhode Island? Was it Georgia? Or was it South Carolina? And that was Georgia. What did the First Continental Congress do? Did it declare independence? Did it form the Continental Army? Or did it ask the King and Parliament to repeal the Coercive Acts? It asked the King and Parliament to repeal the Coercive Acts. How many people died in the Boston Massacre? Was it 500 people? Was it 50 people? Or was it 5 people who died in the Boston Massacre? Well, 5 people died in the Boston Massacre. Who is considered the first American to die in the struggle for independence? Was it Crispus Attucks? Was it John Barry? Or was the first American to die Samuel Adams? That was Crispus Attucks. Who wrote the popular pamphlet Common Sense? Was that Thomas Jefferson? Was it Thomas Paine? Or was that Robert Morris? Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine. What fort did Benedict Arnold plan to turn over to the British as part of changing sides? Fort Pittsburgh, Fort McHenry, or was it West Point? He planned to turn over West Point. What war inspired the British Parliament to tax the American colonies? The 100 Years' War, the War of the Roses, or the 7 Years' War? And that was the 7 Years' War. What was the name of the treaty that officially ended the American Revolution? The Treaty of Paris, the Treaty of London, or the Treaty of Yorktown? That was the Treaty of Paris. What was the name of the uprising that happened in response to the first federal tax on a domestic product? The Tea Rebellion, the Rum Rebellion, or the Whiskey Rebellion? And that was the Whiskey Rebellion. What was the result of the Whiskey Rebellion? The result of the Whiskey Rebellion? It established that the federal government had the right and ability to enact and enforce national taxes and laws. What was the name of the congressional proposal to form a national government with one house of Congress with equal representation by each state? The Delaware Plan, the New Jersey Plan, or the Rhode Island Plan? And that was the New Jersey Plan. What was the name of the congressional proposal to form a national government with two houses of Congress with representation based on population? The New York Plan, the Virginia Plan, or the Pennsylvania Plan? And that was the Virginia Plan. What was the name of the plan that balanced the disagreements on representation between large and small states? The Great Compromise, the Great Agreement, or the Fundamental Agreement? And that was the Great Compromise. What was the ratio used to count enslaved people for the purposes of federal representation in the original form of the Constitution? 3/4, 1/2, or 3/5? And they were counted as 3/5 of a person. In the original form of the Constitution, how were senators selected? Were they selected by popular election, by state legislators, or by the previous senator? Originally, senators were chosen by the state legislatures. What was the name of the series of articles written by John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and John Madison to convince the American public to support the new Constitution? The Persuasive Papers, the Reynolds Pamphlet, or the Federalist Papers? That was the Federalist Papers. How many Federalist Papers were written? Were there 55 of them? Were there 85 of them? Or were there 100? There were 85 Federalist Papers written. What year was the Stamp Act enacted? Was it enacted in 1765, 1776, or 1750? The Stamp Act was enacted in 1765. Who is credited with saying, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country," when captured by the British? Was that David Franks? Was that Nathan Hale? Or was it John Laurens? And those words were said by Nathan Hale. What was the name of the German mercenaries hired by the British to fight in the American Revolution? Were they the Hessians? Were they the Regulars? Or were they the Prussians? The British hired the Hessians. Which American commander proudly declared, "I have not yet begun to fight," when asked to surrender? Was that John Barry? Was it David Franks? Or was it John Paul Jones? That was John Paul Jones. What was the final battle of the American Revolution? The Battle of Bunker Hill, the Battle of Trenton, or the Battle of Yorktown? And that was the Battle of Yorktown. How many years is a Senate term? Is it 6 years? Is it 2 years? Or is it 4 years? A senatorial term lasts for 6 years. What was the name of Martha Washington's enslaved personal maid who ran to freedom in 1796, never to be recaptured? Was that Sally Hemings? Was it Hercules Posey? Or was it Ona Judge? And that was Ona Judge. What year was the Act of Gradual Emancipation passed in Pennsylvania? Was it 1775? Was it 1780? Or was that in 1800? And that was in 1780. Which state first abolished slavery outright in 1777? Was it New Hampshire? Was it Vermont? Or was it Rhode Island that first abolished slavery in 1777? And that was the state of Vermont. Where did Washington's army spend the harrowing winter of 1777 to 1778? Did they spend it at Valley Forge? Was it in Mayunk, or was it in Moorestown? They spent that cold winter in Valley Forge. How long did the British occupy New York City? 1776 to 1783, 1775 to 1780, or 1777 to 1779? The British occupied New York City from 1776 to 1783. What is the name of George Washington's Virginia plantation? Is it Monticello? Is it Mount Vernon? Or is it called Montpelier? George Washington's Virginia plantation, Mount Vernon. What river was the new capital of Washington, D.C. established along? Was it established along the Delaware River, the Potomac River, or was it the Hudson River? Washington, D.C. was established along the Potomac River. How large was the original plan for Washington, D.C.? 100 square miles, 80 square miles, or 200 square miles? The original plan for Washington, D.C., 100 square miles. Which delegate to the Continental Congress is known for signing his name larger than the other delegates? Was that Benjamin Franklin? Was it John Adams? Or was it John Hancock? Well, that was John Hancock. What did the British promise enslaved people should they fight on the side of the British? What promise did the British make to the enslaved people? Fight with us and you will gain your freedom. They promised their freedom. What was the name of the main group agitating for independence before and during the war? The Committee of Tar and Feathers, the Sons of Liberty, or the Sons of Freedom? And that was the Sons of Liberty. What epidemic hit Philadelphia in 1793, forcing the federal and state governments to take an early recess? Was it a flu epidemic, the yellow fever epidemic, or was it the plague? It was yellow fever. Which founding father stayed in Philadelphia during the yellow fever epidemic, incorrectly assuming his childhood in the Caribbean gave him immunity? That founding father would be Alexander Hamilton. What was the name of the first purpose-built federal building in the United States? The First Bank of the U.S., Federal Hall, or was it the White House? The first purpose-built building was the First Bank of the U.S. What bird did Benjamin Franklin think should be the United States mascot? The eagle, the turkey, or did he think the national mascot should be the dove? Benjamin Franklin thought the turkey should be our national symbol. In what year did the British occupy Philadelphia? 1780, 1782, or 1777? That would be 1777. Which European general showed up to Valley Forge with his dogs in tow? Was that Baron von Steuben? Was it Jean-Baptiste Rochambeau? Or was it Casimir Pulaski? And that was Baron von Steuben. What position did the United States take during the French Revolution? They allied with France, neutrality, or they allied with Britain? During the French Revolution, we stayed neutral. Who was the United States' first Secretary of State? Was it Thomas Jefferson? Was it Alexander Hamilton? Or was it Aaron Burr? The first Secretary of State was Thomas Jefferson. When did the British occupy Savannah, Georgia? July 1777, December 1778, or March 1780? The British occupied Savannah, Georgia, December 1778. How many terms did George Washington serve as president? Did he serve 1 term, 2 terms, or did he serve 3 terms? Well, George Washington set the precedent for serving only 2 terms. When did the Liberty Bell crack? 1793, 1781, or did it crack in 1752? The Liberty Bell cracked in 1752. Who led the British at the Battle of Yorktown? General Howe, Benedict Arnold, or was that General Cornwallis? Leading the British at the Battle of Yorktown was General Cornwallis. Who won the Battle of Bunker Hill? The Battle of Bunker Hill was won by the British, but at great cost. Where is Bunker Hill? Is it in Lexington? Is it in Boston? Or is it in New York City? Bunker Hill is located in Boston. What state was George Washington from? Was he from Virginia? Was he from South Carolina? Or was George Washington from Georgia? George Washington was from Virginia. What was the name of the enslaved person with whom Thomas Jefferson fathered 6 children? Was it Ona Judge? Was it Phyllis Wheatley? Or was it Sally Hemings? Sally Hemings. How did Thomas Jefferson expand the territory of the United States? The Louisiana Purchase, the Lewis and Clark Expedition, or the French and Indian War? It was through the Louisiana Purchase. That was question 100. Thanks for playing Quiz Time. Drop your score in the comments, please, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. Once again, this is Quiz Time. Thanks for playing, and we'll see you in the next video.